Israel may try to block every video of rockets raining down on its cities, but here's what it really doesn't want you to see. On the night of June 13, 2025, Iran unleashed its most devastating attack yet. And this time, it used something that changed everything. Minutes after Israel's preemptive strikes on Iranian territory, more than 150 rockets streaked across the sky toward Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, and Beersheba. And these were no ordinary rockets. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps had just unleashed its secret weapon. Hypersonic Fata missiles that Israel's famed air defenses simply couldn't stop. It was June 13, 2025, and what had begun as Israel's most ambitious military operation was about to turn into its worst nightmare. Israeli F-35 fighters were already deep in Iranian airspace as part of Operation Rising Lion, a massive preemptive strike designed to Iran's nuclear program once and for all. But while the pilots were celebrating their initial successes, something unprecedented was happening in Tehran's underground command centers. Just minutes after the first Israeli bombs hit Iranian soil, a new form of retaliation was launched. This was no longer like the previous exchanges, when most Iranian missiles were shot down like flies. No, this time Iran had something different, something that gave Israeli military experts the chills. As the sirens wailed in Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, and Beersheba, the Israelis scurried for cover, expecting another show of interceptions from their famous Iron Dome. They had no idea what was really flying toward them. The first wave of missiles launched in the Iran operation, True Promise 3, looked normal on radar, but mixed in among the ordinary ballistic missiles were objects that made the operators look twice at the screen. They were flying at incredible speeds, performing maneuvers that defied all known laws of missile technology. For the first time in decades, the Israeli military felt real fear as they watched these mysterious projectiles hurtle toward their homeland at speeds their systems had never encountered. Deep beneath the mountains of Iran, far from satellites and spies, Iranian scientists were perfecting a weapon that could change the calculus of Middle East warfare. The Fata-2 hypersonic glide vehicle was not just another missile. It was a paradigm shifter, clad in titanium ceramic heat shields. This beast could accelerate to Mach 15, or more than 18,000 kilometers per hour, faster than any interceptor in Israel's arsenal. But speed was only the beginning of the problems. As Fata-2 pierced the upper atmosphere, it created a plasma cloud around it, a superheated, ionized cap that effectively made the missile invisible to radar. Israel's air defenses, which had tracked thousands of targets for years, suddenly went blind. Their sophisticated sensors could not maintain lock onto these phantoms. The plasma shield not only hid the missile, it also jammed communications, creating dead spots in Iran's carefully constructed defense network. What truly set the Fata apart from anything Iran had previously deployed was its ability to think and adapt in flight. Using advanced guidance systems, presumably enhanced by Russian technology, the missile could change course multiple times, zigzagging up, down, left, right, even looping and spiraling. All at hypersonic speeds. Israel's Arrow interceptors, designed for predictable trajectories, were hopelessly trying to catch a target that refused to play by the rules. The warhead was also striking in its miniaturization. 200 kilograms of powerful explosives in a package small enough to maintain speed while still delivering a monstrous punch. Even more alarming to Israeli planners was the news that these warheads were modular. Conventional charges today, the implications of that thought alone would send chills from Tel Aviv to Washington. Iran had created not just a new missile, but a delivery system capable of radically changing the strategic balance in the region. As the first Fata eyes began their final dive on Israeli cities, the air defense operators watched in horror as their most advanced systems stalled. The combination of extreme speed, active evasions, and electromagnetic interference created a perfect storm, overwhelming even the legendary architecture of the Israeli air defense system. What happened next shook Israel's confidence to its core. The unthinkable was happening right before their eyes. The Israeli defense operators watched in horror as their screens showed what they had never seen before. Several Iranian missiles simply ignored the interceptors. The famed Iron Dome, David, and even advanced 3 missile systems that had protected Israel for years were being outmaneuvered by the new threats. Of the more than 400 missiles Iran launched, an alarmingly large number got through, and it was no accident. Iran had found Israel's Achilles heel, mathematics. Each Arrow interceptor cost about $3 million, and there was a limited supply. By mixing the revolutionary Fata-2 with conventional ballistic missiles, Iran was forcing Israel to fire interceptors at every target, rapidly depleting its defense reserves. It was like shooting a golden bullet at a conventional one. Only some of the incoming projectiles were anything but conventional. The strategy was striking in its simplicity. Wear down the defenses, then strike with real weapons. The first confirmed strike shocked the Israeli command. The Fatah-2 penetrated all layers of defense and crashed into a strategic infrastructure facility near Tel Aviv. It later turned out to be dangerously close to the IDF headquarters. The explosion was not only physical, it shattered the myth of Israel's invincibility. Within hours, more strikes followed. Critical facilities in Beersheba received direct hits. 4 residential buildings were destroyed in the Salved Zion, and the city's main hospital suffered. According to officials, there was significant damage. But the numbers told an even more alarming story. The famous 90% interception rate collapsed in the face of the new missiles. Against hypersonic Fathahs, the effectiveness barely reached 50%. And that's a generous estimate. According to some estimates, when faced with the most advanced variants, the Israeli one demonstrated less than 30% success rate. For a country that built its entire defense doctrine on air superiority and missile defense, this was a disaster. The financial hemorrhage was almost as devastating as the physical damage. Each night of defense was costing Israel about $285 million, a sum that would alarm even the accountants of the richest countries. The leading business publication The Marker came up with shocking statistics. At this rate, the country was burning through almost $2 billion a week just to maintain the account. And that's not counting the interceptors, which were rapidly in short supply. Intelligence leaked to the press claimed that an effective defense would only last 10 to 12 days at the current intensity. In an emergency bunker near Jerusalem, Benjamin Netanyahu sat surrounded by the Security Council, and his usual confidence was noticeably shaken. The man who promised the Israelis complete protection was faced with an impossible reality. In a hastily arranged interview with Fox News, Netanyahu admitted that a wave had swept through society. "We were hit 10 times harder than we expected." From the lips of the leader of the famous bravada, the words were spoken with sheer fear. Across Israel, civilians were huddled in shelters. And it wasn't a case of getting out in a few hours. The sirens never stopped. Day after day, night after night, the wail continued as the Iranian missiles continued to fly. In Tel Aviv, families slept in fortified rooms. Children cried as the Golka blasts echoed through the night. The psychological strain was mounting rapidly. Helplines were seeing a 400% increase in calls. Thousands were experiencing extreme anxiety and panic attacks. Behind closed doors, Israeli military officials were discussing the previously unthinkable. The supply of arrow interceptors was growing faster than anyone had predicted. Secret meetings with the American military were becoming increasingly desperate. Israel's generals were practically begging for urgent supplies. The US was helping, rushing in additional THAAD and Patriot missiles, but everyone knew they were just stopgap measures against a game-changing threat. Secret military assessments, leaked by alarmed insiders, painted an even bleaker picture. It wasn't just the interceptor shortage. The entire defensive doctrine was in question. One senior officer, speaking anonymously to the media, said what many had thought but were afraid to say: "We built a strategy to win the last war." Iran had started the next one. The realization that Israel had no effective response to hypersonic gliders shook the defense community. Emergency measures were put into place across the country. The IDF announced the deployment of previously classified electronic warfare units in a desperate attempt to disrupt the targeting of incoming threats. The new Barak missiles, rushed into service, offered hope, but they were too few, too late. Each night brought fresh horrors, fresh victims, fresh destruction, fresh evidence that Israel's defensive shield had cracked beyond repair. A nation that had always projected power was experiencing an alien sensation, a vulnerability that kept Israeli intelligence awake not only at what Iran had already unleashed, but at what they knew was still lurking in those mountain strongholds. The Fatah missiles were just the tip of an increasingly dangerous iceberg. Deep in underground complexes across Iran, an arsenal of increasingly sophisticated weapons waited in the shadows. And most frightening of all, Iran was showing remarkable restraint, using only a fraction of its capabilities. The Haramshah 4 missile represented the latest in Iranian warfare technology. With a range of over 2,000 kilometers and an advanced hypersonic glide vehicle, it could theoretically strike anywhere in Israel from deep inside Iranian territory. Intelligence claimed that Iran had at least 50 of these monsters, and yet none had yet flown. Analysts read this as a clear signal. Tehran could up the ante at any moment, and then there was the winged Sumar. A weapon so advanced that the thought of it made Israeli strategists sick. With a range of 2,500 kilometers and flying at treetop level, Invisible to most radars, Sumar could evade defenses like a ghost. The RAD system added another layer of threat. It was designed for lightning-fast tactical strikes that could overwhelm local defenses before anyone knew what had happened. The real shocker, however, was the interception of the Prigorods, which pointed to extensive Russian involvement in the Iranian missile program. The speed with which Iran had mastered hypersonics raised serious questions. Western intelligence agencies had tracked mysterious cargo flights between Moscow and Tehran. The deliveries coincided with Iran's technological breakthroughs. The Fateh-2 plasma shield looked suspiciously like Russian designs, and the new guidance systems far surpassed the country's previous capabilities. Production capacity was becoming a living nightmare. Satellites recorded that the underground factories of Faran and Tabriz were working non-stop. Cautious estimates spoke of 50 Fatehs a week, but some experts feared the count was higher. With more than half of the arsenal intact, Iran could continue this campaign for months. The Israeli Defense Ministry was ruled by a controlled HAS. Emergency meetings were held around the clock. The deployment of the new Barak MX systems was accelerated by a month. Technicians worked without sleep. In one of the first battles, the Barak shot down 8 Iranian drones. A tiny victory in an ocean of defeats. But even it choked against hypersonics. The disclosure of the existence of electronic warfare units was a sharp step towards candor. These top-secret units, previously unmentioned, suddenly became the last resort. They tried to knock the missiles off course with powerful jammers. Some success against conventional munitions, but the Fateh's autonomous guidance stubbornly held. American support came in waves, but it looked like trying to bail out a sinking ship with a teaspoon. C-17 transports landed every few hours, unloading TAT and Patriot batteries. Everyone knew these systems were designed for another era. Private Pentagon reports, passed on only to the top, were brutally honest. Current technology was not designed to handle what Iran was producing. The numbers were frightening. Intelligence calculated that at current rates, the era would run out in 10 to 12 days. Emergency orders went to factories, but interceptors took months to build. Israel was in a race against time that it could not win by conventional means. Desperate times called for desperate measures. Israel secretly turned to Saudi Arabia and the UAE for additional cover. Cyber units attacked Iranian infrastructure. Special forces prepared for near-suicidal raids on launch sites. Any option, even the last resort, was on the table. The country had catastrophically underestimated the threat. The strategic balance in the Middle East had changed beyond recognition. Most alarming was Iran's patience. With hundreds of missiles in reserve, it maintained a steady tempo of strikes, slowly wearing down Israel's defenses and its reserves of power for a knockout finale. The intercepts revealed heated debates in the Iranian headquarters. The Hawks demanded that Haramshah 4 and Sumar be launched immediately, but cooler-headed commanders realized that keeping these cards up their sleeves was an unprecedented lever. Every day without their launch forced Israel to spend billions to defend against a strike that might not come. Psychological warfare was almost as effective as physical attacks. The missiles that hadn't yet been launched were more frightening than those already launched. Simulation after simulation showed that if Iran launched its entire arsenal at once, Israel's defenses would collapse within hours. Sumar would sneak under radar while Fateh-2 drew fire and Ra'ad would fire into the gaps. A nightmare with no good way out. Alarm bells rang from Washington to Brussels. President Trump's statements contradicted each other. He claimed that everything was under control while authorizing emergency military assistance. Europe called for an immediate ceasefire, but the words sank in a vacuum. The ISIS Security Council met again and again, issuing tough statements that both sides ignored. The hastily concluded ceasefire of June 23 became a bitter joke within hours. Israel claimed that Iran had launched missiles after the agreement had gone into effect. Tehran accused Israel of hitting a radar outside the capital. Trust, already shaky, collapsed completely. American mediators just threw up their hands. Each side presented evidence of the other's guilt. The truce was not just dead, it was never born.